In the heart of Kenya's Masai Mara, something impossible was happening. A mother gorilla, tears streaming down her massive face, was placing her newborn baby directly into human hands. This wasn't just any baby. This was a creature so rare that most scientists go their entire careers without seeing one. A white gorilla, and it was dying. The veterinarian looked down at the tiny, snow-white infant in her arms, its chest barely rising and falling. Blood seeped from deep claw marks across its fragile body. The leopard attack had been swift and brutal, happening just minutes after birth. Now, with less than an hour to live, this miracle of nature needed a miracle of medicine. But what happened next would change everything we thought we knew about the relationship between humans and wild animals. It would spark a revolution in conservation practices across Africa and create a bond so profound that it would move the world to tears. The white gorilla's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, looking directly at the human who held its life in her hands. In that instant, three species, gorilla, human, and hope itself, became forever intertwined in a story that defied every rule of the wild. But to understand how a wild gorilla came to trust humans with her most precious gift, how a dying baby survived against impossible odds, and how this single moment changed conservation forever, we need to go back to the beginning, back to a morning when veteran ranger Malik heard sounds from the forest that he had never heard before. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you love stories about the amazing connections between humans and animals, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for Wind Echo Untold. Trust me, this story will stay with you long after the video ends. Malik Dobu had walked these paths for over 20 years. Every morning before dawn, he would begin his rounds through the Masai Mara National Reserve, his weathered boots knowing every root, every stone, every hidden trail that wound through this vast wilderness. At 53, Malik had seen it all, or so he thought. He was a man of few words, but deep understanding. The son of a Maasai warrior, Malik had grown up listening to the stories of his grandfather, tales of a time when humans and animals lived in a delicate balance of respect and distance. His grandfather taught him that every creature had its place, its purpose, and its boundaries. Watch, learn, but never interfere, the old man would say. Nature has her own wisdom. This philosophy had guided Malik through 2 decades of conservation work. He had watched lions make their kills, witnessed the Great Migration, seen elephants mourn their dead. He had learned to read the subtle signs of the savannah, the way birds scattered before a predator, how the wind carried scents that told stories of life and death, survival and surrender. But Malik was more than just a ranger. He was a protector, a silent guardian of this vast ecosystem that spawned across 1,500 square kilometers of African wilderness. He knew every gorilla family in his sector, had named many of them, watched their children grow from playful infants to powerful adults. Yet he had never gotten too close, never crossed that invisible line between observer and participant. That's why the sounds he heard on this particular morning stopped him cold. Malik paused near a cluster of acacia trees, about 3 kilometers from the main camp. The sun was just beginning to paint the horizon in shades of gold and amber. But instead of the usual gentle grunts and murmurs of a gorilla family beginning their day, he heard something different, something urgent, something that spoke of struggle and pain. Sara, a magnificent silverback female in her prime, was in labor. Malik had watched her for months, her belly growing rounder as she prepared for motherhood. Sara was special, not just because of her size and intelligence, but because of her position in the family group. She was the daughter of the dominant silverback, Kamau, and had inherited his fearless nature and protective instincts. Through his binoculars, Malik could see Sara's powerful form hunched against the base of a large tree, her muscles contracting with each wave of labor. This was normal. This was nature. This was exactly the kind of moment where his grandfather's wisdom applied. Watch, learn, but never interfere, the old man would say. But something about Sara's distress calls felt different, more urgent, more desperate than the usual sounds of childbirth in the wild. Malik found himself taking a step closer, then another. His radio crackled softly on his belt. He could call Dr. Elena Gutierrez, the reserve's chief veterinarian, but for what? This was nature taking its course. Still, something deep in his experienced gut told him that this birth was not going to be ordinary.
Dr. Elena Gutierrez was already 3 hours into her morning rounds when her radio crackled to life. She had been treating a young zebra with an infected wound when Malik's voice came through, calm, but with an undertone that made her immediately pay attention. Dr. Gutierrez, this is Malik, Sector 7. I need you to hear something. Elena paused, setting down her medical kit. In her 15 years working with African wildlife, she had learned to read the subtle variations in her colleagues' voices. Malik wasn't one for dramatics or unnecessary radio calls. If he was reaching out, something significant was happening. She pressed the respond button. Go ahead, Malik. What's the situation? It's Sara. She's giving birth. But there was a pause, and Elena could hear unusual sounds in the background. Deep, resonant calls that seemed different from typical gorilla vocalizations. Something's not right. The baby. I think you need to see this. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Sara was one of the gorillas they had been monitoring closely. At 12 years old, she was experiencing her first pregnancy, and Elena had been hoping everything would go smoothly. In the wild, gorilla births were usually straightforward affairs, with mothers giving birth quickly and quietly to minimize vulnerability to predators. Are there complications with the delivery? Elena asked, already beginning to pack her emergency veterinary kit. The delivery seems to be going fine, but the baby, Dr. Gutierrez, I've never seen anything like this. The baby is white. Elena stopped moving. White? What do you mean, white? I mean completely white. Snow white. No dark fur anywhere. The baby is moving, breathing, seems healthy, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen in 20 years of working with gorillas. Elena's mind raced. A gorilla white? In the wild? She had read about cases of albinism in gorillas, but they were extraordinarily rare. Perhaps 1 in millions. Most albino primates in the wild don't survive long due to their lack of natural camouflage and increased vulnerability to predators and skin conditions. Malik, are you certain? She asked, already moving toward her vehicle. Complete albinism? Dr. Gutierrez, I'm looking at it right now. The baby is completely white. Fur, skin, everything. And Sara, she seems confused. She's holding the baby, but she keeps looking at it like she doesn't understand what she's seeing. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just unusual. This was potentially a once-in-a-lifetime wildlife event. But more importantly, if the baby truly was albino, it would need immediate care and protection. Albino animals in the wild faced a host of challenges that their normally pigmented counterparts didn't have to worry about. I'm on my way, Elena said. Don't do anything. Just observe and keep me updated. As Elena drove toward Sector 7, her mind was spinning with the implications. An albino gorilla in the wild was not just rare, but a medical miracle and a conservation nightmare rolled into one. The baby would be vulnerable to sunlight. Predators would easily spot its white fur against the dark forest backdrop, and other gorillas might reject it due to its unusual appearance. But Elena had no idea that the real crisis was just beginning. As she navigated the rough terrain toward Malik's location, neither he nor Elena could have predicted what would happen next, because in the wild, even the most miraculous births attract unwanted attention. And something had been watching Sara's labor from the shadows, something hungry, powerful, and completely indifferent to the miracle that had just occurred. The leopard, had been tracking Sara for days, waiting for exactly this moment of vulnerability.
Elena's Land Rover bounced violently over the rocky terrain as she pushed the vehicle to its limits. Every minute counted when dealing with wildlife emergencies, and an albino gorilla birth was unlike anything she had encountered in her career. Her medical kit rattled in the back seat. Emergency antibiotics, pain medications, portable monitoring equipment, and sterilization supplies. She had no idea what she would need, but experience had taught her to be prepared for anything. The radio crackled again. Malik's voice was tighter now, more urgent. "Dr. Gutierrez, we have a problem. A big problem." Elena grabbed the radio while steering around a fallen branch. "What's happening, Malik?" "Leopard. Single female, about 40 meters out and circling. Sara's focused on the baby, and I don't think she's aware of the threat yet." Elena's blood ran cold. Leopards were opportunistic hunters, and they knew that newborns, especially unusual ones that might be rejected by their mothers, were easy prey. The combination of Sara's exhaustion from birth and a white baby that would stand out like a beacon against the dark forest floor created a perfect storm of vulnerability. "Can you scare it off?" Elena asked, pressing harder on the accelerator. "I'm going to try. But if I intervene too dramatically, I might cause Sara to panic and accidentally harm the baby. These situations required delicate handling." Elena understood the dilemma. Wildlife management was always about balance, protecting animals while respecting their natural behaviors and environments. Too much human intervention could be as dangerous as too little. "I'm 10 minutes out," Elena said. "Just keep eyes on the situation and don't take any unnecessary risks." But as Elena would later learn, in the wild, situations can change in seconds. Malik held his breath as he watched the leopard move through the underbrush. The female was lean but muscular, probably about 4 years old and in her prime hunting years. Her spotted coat provided perfect camouflage against the dappled shadows of the forest floor, and her movements were liquid smooth, each step calculated and silent. Sara was completely focused on her newborn, examining the tiny white creature with a mixture of fascination and confusion. The baby gorilla, weighing perhaps 3 pounds, was nestled against its mother's massive chest. Its white fur was startlingly bright against Sara's dark coat, and even from 50 meters away, Malik could see why the leopard had been drawn to investigate. Malik slowly reached for his radio, planning to update Elena, when the leopard made her move. It happened in a blur of spotted fury. The leopard exploded from the underbrush with a speed and power that made her species one of Africa's most efficient predators. Sara, despite her size and strength, was caught completely off guard. The leopard's target wasn't Sara, it was the white baby that looked so different from anything the predator had encountered before. Sara's protective roar shook the forest canopy as she instinctively pulled her baby closer, but the leopard was already airborne. Powerful claws extended, she landed directly on Sara's back, reaching desperately for the white infant. What followed was a battle that Malik would remember for the rest of his life. Sara, despite being exhausted from labor, fought with the fury that only a mother protecting her young can summon. She rolled, twisted, and used her massive hands to try to dislodge the leopard while simultaneously protecting her baby. The leopard, realizing that a direct confrontation with a full-grown gorilla was a losing proposition, managed to slash at the baby before launching herself away from Sara's crushing grip. Her claws raked across the infant's tiny chest and left arm, leaving deep gashes in the white fur that immediately began to bleed. Sara's roars of rage and pain echoed through the forest as the leopard retreated into the dense undergrowth, apparently deciding that this particular meal wasn't worth the risk of tangling with an enraged mother gorilla. Malik was already running toward the scene when his radio crackled with Elena's voice. "Malik, I heard the commotion from 2 kilometers away. What's happening?" "The leopard attacked. The baby is injured. Sara is holding it, but there's blood. A lot of blood." When Elena arrived at the scene, she found Malik crouched behind a large tree about 20 meters from Sara, who was holding her injured baby and making soft, distressed vocalizations. The white fur around the infant's chest was matted with blood, and even from a distance, Elena could see that the leopard's claws had done significant damage. "How bad is it?" Elena whispered as she crouched next to Malik. "Bad. The baby's breathing is shallow, and it hasn't moved much since the attack. Sara keeps looking at the wounds, but she doesn't seem to know what to do." Elena studied the situation through her binoculars. This was exactly the kind of scenario that conservation protocols were designed to address, or rather, to avoid addressing. The Masai Mara operated under a strict non-intervention policy when it came to natural predator-prey interactions. The philosophy was simple. Nature knows best, and human interference, no matter how well-intentioned, often caused more problems than it solved. But as Elena watched Sara gently touch her baby's wounds with her massive finger, she faced an impossible decision. This wasn't just any gorilla baby. This was potentially one of the rarest animals on Earth. The chances of another albino gorilla being born in the wild were virtually zero. If this baby died, it would represent the loss of something truly irreplaceable. "Elena," Malik said quietly, "in my grandfather's stories, there were times when the spirits demanded that humans act, not just watch. This feels like one of those times." Elena looked at her colleague. Malik had never, in 20 years of working together, suggested intervening in a natural situation. His respect for the non-interference policy was absolute. If he was suggesting action, the situation was truly exceptional. "If we do this," Elena said slowly, "we're both risking our jobs. The park administration has very clear policies about these situations." "I know," Malik replied, "but look at that baby. It's not going to survive without help. And Sara, have you ever seen a gorilla mother react like this?" Elena looked through her binoculars again. Sara was holding her baby in a way that Elena had never witnessed before. Instead of the typical protective clutching that gorilla mothers exhibited when their infants were threatened, Sara was holding the baby almost presentationally, as if she were showing it to them, as if she were asking for help. "This is insane," Elena whispered. "But you're right. We have to try." What happened next defied everything that Elena and Malik knew about gorilla behavior. As they slowly approached, Sara didn't retreat, she didn't become defensive. Instead, she watched them with what could only be described as expectant attention. "I've never seen anything like this," Elena breathed as they got within 10 meters from the massive gorilla. "She should be charging us or retreating with the baby." Sara made a soft vocalization, not the aggressive bark or roar that would be expected, but something almost conversational. She looked down at her bleeding baby, then back at the two humans approaching, then down at the baby again. "It's like she's trying to tell us something," Malik whispered. When they were within 5 meters, Sara did something that made both humans freeze in astonishment. She extended her arms towards them, holding the injured baby outward, as if offering the infant for their inspection. Elena felt her heart pounding as she realized what was happening. Somehow, this wild gorilla mother understood that the humans approaching her had the ability to help her baby. Whether it was instinct, intelligence, or something else entirely, Sara was choosing to trust the very species that her kind had been taught to fear. "She wants us to take the baby," Elena whispered in amazement. Sara made another soft vocalization, and this time she actually took a step toward Elena, still holding the injured infant extended in her massive hands. With tears streaming down her face, Elena slowly reached out and accepted the most precious gift she had ever been offered. The tiny white gorilla, barely an hour old, fit easily in her human hands. Up close, the leopard's damage was even more devastating than she had feared. Deep claw marks ran across the baby's chest, and one had punctured dangerously close to the heart. But what shocked Elena even more was what happened next. As she took the baby, Sara didn't retreat or show any sign of regret. Instead, she sat down directly in front of her and began making soft, rhythmic sounds, the same vocalizations that gorilla mothers use to comfort their young. "Malik," Elena whispered, "she's not just trusting us with her baby, she's trying to help us treat it." The profound intelligence and emotional depth of this interaction hit Elena like a physical force. This wasn't just animal behavior, this was communication, cooperation, and trust at a level that challenged everything she thought she knew about the relationship between humans and wild animals. "We need to get to the veterinary center," Elena said. "This baby needs surgery, and it needs it now." But as they prepared to leave, Sara did something that would haunt Elena forever. The gorilla mother reached out and gently stroked her baby's white fur one more time, making a sound that could only be described as a lullaby. Then she looked directly into Elena's eyes and made a sound that seemed to say, "Please, don't let my baby die."
The drive back to the veterinary center was the longest 30 minutes of Elena's life. The baby gorilla lay wrapped in blankets on her lap, its breathing becoming increasingly shallow. Malik drove while Elena monitored the infant's vital signs with portable equipment. "Pulse is getting weaker," Elena reported. "We're losing him." "Him?" Malik asked. Elena had done a quick examination during the drive. "It's a male, a little boy." Somehow, knowing the baby's sex made the situation even more personal. more urgent. "What are you going to name him?" Malik asked, navigating a particularly rough section of road. Elena looked down at the tiny white face, so vulnerable and precious. "Cesar," she said without hesitation. "His name is Cesar." The name felt right. Strong, regal, befitting a creature that might be the rarest of his kind on Earth. When they arrived at the veterinary center, Elena's team was already prepared for emergency surgery. Word had spread quickly through the reserve about the white gorilla, and everyone wanted to help. But as Elena examined Cesar more thoroughly under proper lighting, the full extent of his injuries became clear. "The deepest wound is less than 2 millimeters from his heart," Elena announced to her team. "He's lost a significant amount of blood for his body weight, and his blood pressure is dropping." Dr. James Ochieng, Elena's second-in-command, looked up from the blood work results. "Elena, his blood type is compatible with adult gorilla blood, but we don't have any gorilla blood in our blood bank." Elena felt her heart sink. Gorillas, like humans, had specific blood types, and cross-species transfusions were impossible. Without a transfusion, Cesar would not survive the surgery. "There's only one option," Elena said quietly. "We need Sara." Getting a wild gorilla to voluntarily donate blood to save her baby was something that had never been attempted in the history of wildlife veterinary medicine. Sedating Sara would be dangerous and could harm her ability to later care for Cesar. But asking her to voluntarily submit to a medical procedure was beyond unprecedented. It was theoretically impossible. "Elena," Dr. Ochieng said gently, "what you're suggesting has never been done. We have no protocol for this, no precedent, no way to know how Sara will react." "I know, but we've already crossed into uncharted territory. Sara trusted us with her baby. Maybe, just maybe, she'll trust us to help save him." Malik, who had been quiet during the medical discussions, spoke up. "In my culture, we believe that when the spirits unite human and animal hearts for a common purpose, impossible things become possible. Sara has already shown us that she understands our intentions. Perhaps she'll understand this too." An hour later, they returned to where Sara had remained, sitting in the exact spot where she had given up her baby. She looked up when she saw them approaching, and her soft vocalizations seemed to ask, "How is my son?" Elena approached slowly, carrying a portable blood collection kit. She had no idea how to explain to a gorilla mother that her baby was dying and needed her blood to survive. But as she got closer, Sara extended her arm toward Elena almost as if she had been expecting this request. "It's like she knows," Elena whispered in amazement. The blood collection took less than 10 minutes. Sara remained perfectly still throughout the procedure, occasionally making soft sounds as if to ask about Cesar's condition. When it was over, Sara looked at Elena expectantly, as if to say, "Now will my baby be okay?" The operating room at the Masai Mara Veterinary Center had never hosted a patient quite like Cesar. The tiny white gorilla lay anesthetized on the table, looking impossibly small and fragile under the bright surgical lights. His chest rose and fell in barely perceptible movements as Elena prepared to operate. "Sara's blood is a perfect match," Dr. Ochieng reported. "We're ready to begin the transfusion." As Sara's blood began flowing into his son's tiny body, something remarkable happened. Cesar's vital signs immediately began to improve. His heart rate strengthened, his breathing deepened, and some color returned to his pale skin. "It's working," Elena breathed, as she began the delicate process of cleaning and suturing the leopard's claw wounds. The surgery took 4 hours. Each wound had to be carefully cleaned, examined for damage to underlying organs, and precisely stitched. The deepest wound, the one near Cesar's heart, required the most careful attention. Elena worked with the precision of a surgeon operating on human infant, because in many ways, that's exactly what she was doing. "His heart looks good," Elena announced as she examined the cardiac tissue around the wound. "The claws missed the major vessels by millimeters. He's incredibly lucky." By the time Elena finished the last suture, word of Cesar's story had spread beyond the reserve. Conservation organizations across Africa were calling to inquire about the white gorilla. International media outlets were requesting interviews. Scientists were asking to study his unique genetics. But Elena was focused on only one thing: the moment when she could return this baby to his mother. Cesar spent 3 days in intensive care before Elena felt confident about his recovery. During this time, Sara remained close to the veterinary center, often visible through the windows as she sat watching the building where her son was being treated. "She hasn't moved more than 100 meters from this building," Malik reported. "She's not eating much, and she spends most of her time just watching and waiting." On the morning of the 4th day, Elena made the decision to reunite mother and son. Cesar had gained weight and strength, his wounds were healing beautifully, and his white fur was growing back where it had been shaved for surgery. But more importantly, he was exhibiting normal baby gorilla behaviors, grasping reflexes, suckling motions, and the soft vocalizations that indicated healthy neurological development. The reunion took place in a specially prepared area adjacent to the veterinary center, a space that was wild enough for Sara to feel comfortable, but secure enough for Elena to monitor Cesar's recovery. When Sara saw Elena approaching with Cesar in her arms, the gorilla mother made sounds unlike anything Elena had ever heard. They were sounds of pure joy, relief, and gratitude combined into something that transcended species barriers. She reached out with trembling hands to reclaim her son, and when she held him against her chest, both mother and baby made soft, contented sounds that seemed to acknowledge their shared ordeal and survival. But what happened next would change conservation protocols forever. Instead of retreating into the forest with Cesar, Sara remained near the humans. She seemed to understand that her white baby would need continued protection and care that the wild forest couldn't provide. She was choosing to bridge the gap between wild and domestic, creating a new category of existence that no one had ever imagined before. Dr. Martin Kimenju, the reserve's chief administrator, arrived the next morning to assess the situation. Elena expected to be reprimanded for violating non-intervention policies, but instead, she found herself in the middle of an international conservation event. Elena, the story of Cesar and Sara has captured global attention. We have calls from National Geographic, the BBC, conservation organizations from around the world. Everyone wants to know how we're going to handle this situation. Elena looked out at Sara, who was gently grooming Cesar's white fur while keeping one eye on the humans nearby. I don't know, she admitted. This is completely uncharted territory. Well, Dr. Kimenju said with a smile, I guess we're going to have to create new territory. The board has decided to establish a special protected zone specifically for Cesar and Sara. It's a hybrid approach, wild enough to allow natural behaviors, but human oversight to ensure Cesar's unique needs are met. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. You're not going to reprimand us for intervening? Elena, what you and Malik did has opened up entirely new possibilities for human-animal cooperation and conservation. Sara's trust and intelligence have shown us that maybe our rigid non-intervention policies need to be reconsidered. Maybe there's a middle path that honors both wild nature and compassionate intervention.
Within a week of Cesar's surgery, the Masai Mara became the center of international attention. Journalists, scientists, and wildlife enthusiasts from around the world descended on the reserve, all wanting to see the white gorilla and witness the unprecedented relationship between Sara and the human conservation team. Elena found herself thrust into a spotlight she had never wanted. Camera crews followed her daily rounds, reporters peppered her with questions about gorilla behavior and conservation ethics, and scientists requested access to study Cesar's unique genetics and Sara's remarkable trust in humans. This is overwhelming, Elena confided to Malik as they watched yet another news van arrive at the reserve entrance. I became a veterinarian to help animals, not to become some kind of celebrity. Malik nodded thoughtfully, but perhaps this attention is exactly what Cesar and Sara need. The world is watching now, which means the world cares. That protection is something money can't buy. Dr. Kimenju called an emergency meeting of the reserve's board of directors to address the unprecedented situation. Conservation officials from across Kenya, representatives from international wildlife organizations, and government officials gathered to decide Cesar and Sara's fate. We have several options, Dr. Kimenju announced to the assembled group. We can relocate them to a zoo where Cesar's albinism can be better managed. We can continue the current arrangement with supervised access to their natural habitat, or we can attempt something that has never been tried before, creating a new type of protected environment that bridges wild and managed care. Elena stood to address the board. Gentlemen, ladies, with respect, I think Sara has already told us what she wants. She's chosen to trust humans with her son's welfare, but she hasn't chosen to abandon her wild nature. She still forages, still exhibits natural behaviors, still communicates with her family group. She's asking us to be partners, not owners. Dr. Patricia Wanjiku, a renowned conservationist from the Kenya Wildlife Service,
raised a concern that had been weighing on everyone's minds. Dr. Gutierrez, while Sara's trust is remarkable, we must consider Cesar's long-term survival. His albinism makes him vulnerable in ways that no amount of maternal protection can address. He cannot camouflage himself from predators, he's susceptible to skin cancer from sun exposure, and his unique appearance might make him a target for poachers who would see him as extremely valuable. Elena felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Every point Dr. Wanjiku raised was valid. Cesar's white fur made him stand out like a beacon against the brown and green backdrop of the African savanna. Other predators would certainly notice what the leopard had noticed. Here was prey that couldn't hide. What if we created a supervised sanctuary within the reserve? A large protected area where Cesar can grow up with as much natural behavior as possible, but with human oversight to manage the risks that his albinism creates. The room fell silent as board members considered this unprecedented proposal. Finally, Dr. James Nyanga, a government representative, spoke up. The financial cost of such an arrangement would be enormous. Round-the-clock security, veterinary care, specialized equipment for monitoring Cesar's health. We're talking about millions of dollars over his lifetime. That's when something remarkable happened. Dr. Robert Sterling, a representative from the International Gorilla Conservation Foundation, stood up with a document in his hand. Actually, Dr. Sterling said with a smile, I have some news that might change our calculations. The global response to Cesar's story has been extraordinary. In the past week, donations to gorilla conservation have increased by 400% worldwide. People are inspired by Sara's trust and Cesar's survival. They want to be part of this story. He held up the document. The foundation has received pledges totaling over $2 million specifically for Cesar's care and the creation of a new model of conservation that honors both wild nature and necessary human intervention. This could fund the sanctuary for decades. Elena felt her heart racing as she realized that the entire future of conservation practice might be decided in this room. The choice they made about Cesar would set a precedent that could affect wildlife management across Africa and around the world. There's something else we need to consider, Malik said, speaking up for the first time during the formal meeting. Sara's family group, her father Kamau, her brothers, her aunts, they've all been watching from a distance. They're curious about the white baby, but they're also watching Sara's interactions with humans. How we handle this situation will affect their trust in us as well. Dr. Kimenyu nodded thoughtfully. Malik raises an important point. This isn't just about Cesar and Sara. This could affect our relationship with the entire gorilla population in the reserve. Elena stood again, feeling the weight of the moment. I propose we give Sara the choice, she said. We create the protected sanctuary and see if she chooses to use it. If she prefers to keep Cesar in the deeper forest, away from human contact, we respect that choice and provide whatever protection we can from a distance. If she continues to seek our partnership in raising him, we honor that trust. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as board members considered this proposal. Finally, Dr. Kimenyu called for a formal vote. All in favor of creating a specialized sanctuary for Cesar and Sara, with Sara's voluntary participation as the determining factor for its use. One by one, hands went up around the room. When the count was finished, the vote was unanimous. It's decided then, Dr. Kimenyu announced. We're going to attempt something that has never been tried before in wildlife conservation. We're going to create a partnership between human expertise and wild intelligence, with the goal of giving Cesar the best possible chance at a full and natural life. The next month was a whirlwind of activities. Engineers, conservationists, and construction crews worked together to create Cesar's sanctuary, a 50-hectare protected area within the reserve that would provide natural habitat while offering security and medical monitoring. The design was revolutionary. Instead of cages or fences, the sanctuary used natural barriers, rivers, cliffs, and dense vegetation to create a secure perimeter. Observation points were built into the landscape so that researchers could monitor Cesar and Sara without intruding on their daily activities. Emergency medical equipment was stored in camouflage shelters throughout the area. Most importantly, the sanctuary was designed to be expandable. If other members of Sara's family group chose to join them, the protected area could be enlarged to accommodate an entire gorilla community. Elena watched the construction with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Everything depended on Sara's acceptance of this new arrangement. If the gorilla mother rejected the sanctuary and chose to retreat deeper into the wild with Cesar, all of this effort would be meaningless. What if she doesn't like it? Elena asked Malik as they surveyed the nearly completed sanctuary. Then we'll have learned something important about respecting animal choice in conservation, Malik replied. But I think Sara will surprise us. She's been making her own choices all along, trusting us, staying close to the veterinary center, allowing us to monitor Cesar. She's already shown us that she wants to be an active partner in her son's protection. The day of the sanctuary's completion, Elena and Malik approached Sara with careful steps. Cesar, now 6 weeks old and fully recovered from his injuries, was clinging to his mother's chest, his white fur bright and healthy against her dark coat. Sara looked up as they approached, making the soft vocalization that Elena had learned to interpret as a greeting. In her hands, Elena carried something that represented weeks of careful planning, a special harness designed to protect Cesar's skin from the sun while he allowed him complete freedom of movement. Sara, Elena said softly, holding up the harness, "This will protect Cesar's skin from the sun while he plays and explores." To Elena's amazement, Sara extended Cesar towards her, just as she had on that first traumatic day. She seemed to understand that the harness was for Cesar's protection, and she allowed Elena to carefully fit it around the baby's small body. The harness was made from specially treated fabric that blocked harmful UV rays while remaining comfortable and breathable. It was designed to grow with Cesar, ensuring that his albinism wouldn't prevent him from enjoying a normal, active life.
When Elena opened the entrance to the sanctuary, Sara didn't rush in immediately. Instead, she spent nearly an hour at the threshold, examining the new environment with the careful attention that had kept her alive in the wild. She tested the ground with her feet, sniffed the air, listened to the sounds of birds and insects within the protected area. Then, slowly, she took her first steps into what would become Cesar's childhood home. The sanctuary had been designed to mimic Sara's natural habitat as closely as possible. Native trees provided shade and climbing opportunities. A small stream provided fresh water and a place for Cesar to eventually learn to swim. Natural caves offered shelter during storms or extreme weather. But the most remarkable feature was something that couldn't be built or engineered: Sara's immediate comfort within the space. She explored with Cesar clinging to her chest, occasionally setting him down to examine rocks or plants, but always keeping him close. "Look," Malik whispered, pointing to the far edge of the sanctuary. Through the trees, Elena could see shapes moving in the distance, members of Sara's family group, watching from beyond the sanctuary boundaries. Kamau, Sara's father, was visible among them, his massive silverback form unmistakable even from a distance. "They're curious," Elena observed. "They want to see what Sara has chosen for herself and Cesar." Over the next several days, this pattern continued. Sara would explore the sanctuary with Cesar during the day, while her family group observed from the perimeter. Sometimes they would vocalize back and forth, complex conversations that seemed to be about Cesar, the sanctuary, and the humans who had created it. 3 weeks into their residency in the sanctuary, Sara faced her first real test of trust. Cesar had developed a mild respiratory infection. Not serious, but something that required antibiotic treatment. In the wild, such an infection might clear up on its own, or it might prove fatal. In the sanctuary, it could be easily treated, but only if Sara would allow human medical intervention. Elena approached Sara with medical supplies, unsure how the gorilla mother would react to seeing her son treated as a patient again. But Sara's response was both immediate and clear. She presented Cesar for examination, holding him in a position that allowed Elena easy access to listen to his breathing and examine his throat. "His lungs are slightly congested, but it's nothing serious," Elena announced to Malik and the small team of veterinary staff who were observing. "A course of antibiotics should clear it up completely." Administering medication to a baby gorilla required Sara's active cooperation. The antibiotics had to be given orally, twice daily for 7 days. Elena showed Sara the medicine and the syringe, explaining what she was doing, even though she wasn't sure how much the gorilla understood. But Sara's actions spoke louder than any words. She held Cesar securely while Elena administered the first dose, making gentle, reassuring sounds to her son throughout the process. When it was finished, she looked at Elena with what could only be described as expectation. She was waiting for instructions about the next steps in Cesar's treatment. "Tomorrow morning,"
Same time, Elena said, holding up the syringe and pointing to the sun's position in the sky. Sara nodded. Actually nodded in what appeared to be understanding. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. Sara was waiting at the sanctuary's medical station when Elena arrived. She had brought Cesar to the exact spot where treatment had been administered the day previous at the exact time Elena had indicated. She understands scheduling, Elena whispered to Malik in amazement. She brought him here for his medication without being asked. But the truly remarkable moment came when Cesar, recognizing Elena and associating her with the unpleasant taste of medicine, began to fuss and resist. Sara gently but firmly held him in position, making soothing sounds while looking at Elena as if to say, "I understand this is necessary, even if he doesn't." This pattern continued for the entire 7-day treatment course. Each morning, Sara would bring Cesar to the medical station at the appointed time, assist with his treatment, and then spend the rest of the day helping him feel better about the experience. This level of cooperation is unprecedented, Dr. Ocheng observed during one of his regular visits. Sara isn't just allowing medical treatment, she's actively participating in Cesar's healthcare. Word of Sara's extraordinary cooperation spread throughout the international conservation community. Research teams from universities around the world requested permission to study this unique human-gorilla partnership. But Elena was careful to limit outside interference. Sara's trust is precious, Elena explained to visiting scientists. We can't treat this sanctuary like a laboratory or a zoo exhibit. Sara chose to trust us, but that trust could be withdrawn if we exploit it. 2 months into their residency in the sanctuary, something happened that no one had anticipated. Kamau, Sara's father, and the dominant silverback of the family group approached the sanctuary boundary with clear intent to enter. Elena and Malik watched from a concealed observation point as the massive gorilla examined the entrance to the protected area. Kamau was nearly twice Sara's size, a powerful and intimidating presence who had ruled his family group for over a decade. "What do you think he wants?" Elena whispered. "I think he wants to meet his grandson," Malik replied. Sara, seeing her father at the boundary, approached with Cesar in her arms. The reunion between father and daughter was tender and emotional, with soft vocalizations and gentle touching that spoke of deep familial bonds. But the most remarkable moment came when Sara presented Cesar to his grandfather. Kamau, this massive wild silverback, examined the tiny white baby with extraordinary gentleness, touching Cesar's unique fur with one massive finger while making soft, wondering sounds. Then Kamau did something that changed everything. He looked directly at Elena and Malik in their observation point. They had thought they were hidden, but the experienced silverback had known they were there all along. He made a sound that seemed almost like a greeting, acknowledging their presence and their role in his grandson's survival. "He's thanking us," Elena breathed, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. Over the following days, more members of Sara's family group approached the sanctuary. Cesar's aunts and uncles came to meet the white baby who had captured global attention. Each interaction was gentle, curious, and accepting. But the most significant moment came when the family group made a collective decision. Instead of just visiting the sanctuary, they chose to expand their territory to include the protected area. They didn't move in permanently, but they made it part of their regular range, creating a fluid boundary between wild and protected space. They're creating their own hybrid model of conservation, Dr. Kimenju observed during one of his regular visits. They're choosing when to be wild and when to accept human partnership.
Cesar's first birthday was celebrated by conservation organizations around the world, but the most important celebration took place in the quiet sanctuary where he had learned to walk, climb, and play. The tiny white baby had grown into an active, healthy young gorilla who showed no signs of the trauma he had experienced in his first hour of life. His white fur had thickened and developed a slight golden tint in places where sunlight had touched it, despite his protective clothing. His personality was emerging too. He was curious, playful, and remarkably social, not just with other gorillas, but with the humans he had learned to trust. "Look at that," Elena said to Malik, as they watched Cesar attempt to climb a tree under Sara's watchful supervision. "He's completely normal in every way except his color." "Better than normal," Malik replied. "Look at how Sara watches him. Look at how the family group includes him. They don't see him as different. They see him as special." The sanctuary had evolved far beyond its original design. What had started as a protected space for one white gorilla had become a research center for studying human-animal cooperation in conservation. The data being collected on Sara's family group was revolutionizing understanding of gorilla intelligence, communication, and social structure. More importantly, the sanctuary had become a model for conservation programs across Africa. Other reserves were implementing similar hybrid approaches, creating partnerships with wildlife that honored both natural behavior and necessary human intervention. Dr. Elizabeth Vanderberg, a primatologist from the University of Cape Town, had been studying Cesar and Sara's relationship for 3 months when she made a discovery that would reshape conservation biology. "Elena," she said excitedly, "I need to show you something remarkable. We've been analyzing Sara's vocalizations and behavioral patterns, and we've found something extraordinary." Elena joined Dr. Vanderberg at her research station, where computer screens displayed complex audio waveform analyses and behavioral tracking data. "Sara has developed new vocalizations," Dr. Vanderberg explained, "sounds that don't exist in the normal gorilla vocal repertoire. She's created specific calls for communicating with humans, different tones for requesting help, expressing gratitude, and indicating Cesar's needs." Elena stared at the data in amazement. She's evolved a cross-species language? More than that, she's teaching it to Cesar and to other family members. We're witnessing the emergence of a new form of communication that bridges the gap between human and gorilla understanding. This discovery attracted attention from linguists, animal behaviorists, and cognitive scientists worldwide. Sara and her family weren't just accepting human help, they were actively developing new ways to communicate and collaborate across species barriers. The success of Cesar's sanctuary had implications far beyond one white gorilla. Conservation organizations across Africa began reassessing their strict non-intervention policies, creating new guidelines that allowed for compassionate intervention in exceptional circumstances. The Sara Protocol, as it came to be known, established criteria for when human intervention in wildlife situations was appropriate. The protocol emphasized respect for animal choice, minimum interference with natural behavior, and partnership rather than dominance in human-animal relationships. "What Sara taught us," Elena explained to a gathering of international conservationists, "is that animals can be partners in their own conservation. They have intelligence, emotions, and decision-making capabilities that we've historically underestimated." Dr. Kimenju, now recognized as a pioneer in progressive conservation practices, had been invited to speak at conservation conferences around the world about the Masai Mara's new approach. The old model of conservation was about protecting animals from humans. The new model that Sara and Cesar have shown us is about protecting animals with humans. It's about partnership, trust, and recognizing that animals can be active participants in their own survival. By his second birthday, Cesar had become the most famous gorilla in the world, but he remained remarkably unaffected by his celebrity status. He played with his cousins, learned foraging skills from his mother and aunts, and developed the normal social behaviors of a young silverback. His albinism, which had once seemed like a death sentence, had become an asset in ways no one had predicted. His unique appearance made him easily identifiable for research purposes, and his story had inspired millions of people to support gorilla conservation efforts worldwide. More importantly, Cesar's presence in the sanctuary had attracted other members of his extended family group.
The protected area had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing community of gorillas who chose to participate in the hybrid conservation model. "We're not just protecting one white gorilla anymore," Elena observed. "We're protecting an entire social network that has chosen to trust humans with their welfare." Sara's role had evolved too. She had become something unprecedented in wildlife management, a wild animal who served as a liaison between her species and humans. She actively participated in research activities, brought sick or injured family members to Elena for treatment, and even seemed to understand the educational value of her story. When wildlife documentary crews were permitted to film in the sanctuary, Sara would position herself and Cesar in locations that provided the best viewing angles, as if she understood that sharing their story with the world helped ensure their protection. What Sara taught us is that animals can be partners in their own conservation. He has intelligence, emotions, and decision-making capabilities that we've historically underestimated. The old model of conservation was about protecting animals from humans. The new model that Sara and Cesar have shown us is about protecting animals with humans. It's about partnership, trust, and recognizing that animals can be active participants in their own survival.
3 years after Cesar's birth, Sara announced her second pregnancy. The news sent ripples of excitement and anxiety through the conservation community. Would this baby also be albino? How would Sara handle raising 2 offspring with potentially different needs? Elena monitored Sara's pregnancy carefully, providing prenatal care that Sara actively sought out. Regular checkups became part of Sara's routine, and she even seemed to understand the importance of good nutrition during pregnancy, accepting vitamin supplements that Elena offered. When Sara went into labor for the second time, the world held its breath. This birth took place in the safety of the sanctuary, with Elena and her team nearby, but respecting Sara's privacy and natural birthing process. The new baby was born healthy and normal, dark-furred, perfectly camouflaged, and showing no signs of albinism. Sara's reaction to her second child was immediate and protective, but what amazed observers was how she immediately began introducing the baby to Cesar. "She's teaching them both," Elena observed. "She's showing Cesar how to be a big brother, and she's showing the new baby that white fur doesn't make Cesar any less family." The baby, whom researchers named Kizzy, would grow up in an environment where cooperation between species was normal, where medical care was available when needed, and where being different was celebrated rather than feared. 5 years after Cesar's birth, the sanctuary had generated more research data on human-gorilla cooperation than had been collected in the previous century of primate studies. Universities from around the world sent graduate students to study the unique social dynamics that Sara's family had created. Dr. Vanderberg's communication studies had evolved into a comprehensive dictionary of human-gorilla shared vocalizations. The research showed that gorillas were capable of much more sophisticated interspecies communication than had ever been imagined. What we've learned from Sara challenges fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence and emotion, Dr. Vanderberg wrote in her groundbreaking research paper. These gorillas aren't just surviving. They're actively shaping their own conservation story. The medical data from Cesar's care had advanced veterinary treatment of primates worldwide. His successful surgery and recovery had provided crucial insights into gorilla physiology, and the protocols developed for his ongoing health monitoring had been adopted by zoos and conservation programs globally. But perhaps the most important research finding was something that couldn't be quantified in scientific terms: the demonstration that trust, once established between humans and wild animals, could create possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. By Cesar's 5th birthday, the sanctuary had grown from 50 hectares to over 200 hectares, accommodating not just Sara's immediate family, but also other gorilla groups that had chosen to participate in the hybrid conservation model. The success had attracted attention from government officials and international funding organizations. The Kenyan government designated the sanctuary as a special conservation zone with protected status that would ensure its continuation for generations to come. Plans were underway to create similar sanctuaries in other parts of Africa, each adapted to local wildlife populations and environmental conditions. The Masai Mara model was being studied for potential application with other endangered species,
elephants, rhinos, leopards, and even bird populations. What started as an emergency intervention to save one white gorilla has become a new paradigm for wildlife conservation. Dr. Kamenju reflected. Sara didn't just save Cesar, she saved an entire approach to how humans and animals can coexist. As Cesar grew from infant to juvenile to young adult, his unique status in the gorilla community became increasingly clear. He wasn't just accepted despite his albinism, he was valued because of it. His white fur, which had once made him vulnerable to predators, now served as a beacon of hope and cooperation. Other gorillas in the sanctuary seemed to understand that Cesar's presence brought benefits: better medical care, protection from poachers, and a secure environment for raising their own offspring. Cesar's personality reflected his unique upbringing. He was confident and social, comfortable with both humans and gorillas. He had learned to navigate between two worlds, serving as a living bridge between species. When new researchers arrived at the sanctuary, it was often Cesar who first approached them, as if he understood his role as an ambassador for his species. He would allow observations and measurements that other gorillas might resist, seeming to understand that cooperation with humans served the greater good of his community. Cesar's story had attracted wildlife tourists from around the world, but the sanctuary's approach to tourism was as revolutionary as its approach to conservation. Rather than treating the gorillas as entertainment, visitors were educated about conservation challenges and invited to participate in the research and protection efforts. Tourism revenue from Cesar's sanctuary funded conservation programs throughout Kenya and beyond. Visitors didn't just observe, they contributed to ongoing research, participated in habitat restoration projects, and returned home as ambassadors for wildlife conservation. Cesar has taught us that conservation isn't just about protecting animals from humans, it's about creating relationships where both species benefit and both species contribute to survival. The economic impact was substantial. Local communities that had once seen wildlife as competition for resources now saw it as a source of sustainable income and international recognition. The sanctuary employed dozens of local people as guides, researchers, support staff, and security personnel. But the most important impact was cultural. Cesar's story had changed how people thought about the relationship between humans and wild animals, challenging the assumption that these relationships had to be adversarial. Cesar is now a fully grown silverback, strong and healthy despite the challenges his albinism presents. He's become a leader in his community, not in spite of his differences, but because of them. His unique appearance reminds everyone, human and gorilla alike, that diversity can be a source of strength rather than vulnerability. Sara, now a matriarch in her family group, continues to serve as a bridge between human and gorilla communities. She has raised 3 more offspring in the sanctuary, each learning from birth that cooperation with humans can enhance rather than threaten their wild nature. The veterinary center where Elena first operated on a dying white gorilla baby has become an internationally recognized research facility. Students and scientists from around the world come to study the unique relationship between humans and animals that has developed in the Masai Mara. But the story continues to evolve. New generations of gorillas are growing up with no memory of a time when humans were feared rather than trusted. New approaches to conservation are being developed based on the principle that animals can be partners in their own protection. What makes Cesar's story so powerful isn't just the rarity of his white fur or the drama of his early survival. It's the universal truth that his story represents, that trust, once given and honored, can create possibilities that transform the world for both the giver and receiver. Sara's trust didn't just save Cesar, it saved an entire approach to conservation that had been thought impossible. Elena's willingness to risk her career to honor that trust didn't just heal one baby gorilla, it healed the relationship between humans and wildlife in ways that continue to ripple outward. Every time you see a news story about successful wildlife conservation, every time you hear about innovative approaches to protecting endangered species, every time you witness cooperation between humans and animals, you're seeing the legacy of that moment when a mother gorilla chose to trust. The world needs more stories like Cesar's. Stories that remind us that the barriers between species aren't as insurmountable as we might believe, that intelligence and emotion exist throughout the natural world, and that cooperation can achieve what conflict never could. The sanctuary where Cesar lives continues to operate thanks to support from people around the world who believe in the power of compassionate conservation. Every contribution, every share of his story, every person who chooses to see animals as partners rather than subjects helps ensure that future Cesars will have the chance to survive and thrive. But the most important action you can take is to carry Cesar's message into your own life. That trust, once offered, should be honored, that differences can be sources of strength, and that sometimes the most impossible things become possible when we choose cooperation over conflict. Sara trusted humans with her most precious gift, her dying baby. Elena trusted that love and science together could work miracles. Cesar trusted that being different didn't mean being less valuable, and their trust created a story that continues to inspire conservation efforts around the world. What started as a tragedy, a helpless albino gorilla baby attacked by a predator, became a triumph that redefined what's possible when species choose to work together rather than against each other. This is Wind Echo Untold, bringing you stories that reveal the extraordinary connections that exist between all living beings. If Cesar's story moved you, tell us in the comments what you learned about trust, about conservation, or about the power of choosing cooperation over conflict. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because next week we're bringing you another story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the relationship between humans and the natural world. Share Cesar's story with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the most beautiful outcomes come from the most unlikely partnerships, because in a world that often feels divided, Cesar and Sara prove that trust can bridge any gap, even the gap between species. The white gorilla who was born different became the gorilla who made all the difference, and his story is far from over.